Let's go into the 5 critical components of a world-class digital approach. The first component to a world-class digital approach is to build meaningful content. One of the things that you can do at a low cost is to build content about your community. What are the opportunities in your community? What do the universities look like? What does the infrastructure look like in your community? How is your community positioned over the next 10 years? And what has your economy been doing? What are the opportunities within your community? Content is a tremendous opportunity to build a connection with companies looking to expand or relocate. And it is for a lot of reasons that we'll go through here in the next slide. So what does digital content creation look like? Digital content creation can look like a lot of different things. It can look like information on your website. It can look like infographics. It can look like blog articles. It can look like guest posts. It can look like data graphics. It can look like ebooks, white papers, webinars, point of view documents, email marketing, real estate updates. There's so much that you can do from a content perspective that it's almost overwhelming. And a question that I always get is, Guillermo, which content is the best? Which should I use? The answer that I always give is, what are the strengths of the community? And what is the capacity that you have to execute on some of this content? Of all the content that we'll talk about, the number one highest priority is your website. If you don't have content for your website, it is going to be difficult for organizations to find you online and to get a better understanding of the information or the assets that you have available. Some of this digital content not only can be used for blog posts, emails, white papers, but a lot of this content can be repurposed. I like to think of this as recycling content. It takes a tremendous amount of time to build good content, but if you can repurpose it across different channels, using social media, using blogs, you can really generate more visibility for your community than you would have been able to do otherwise. So here's an example of a consultant and a friend of mine, John Longshore, that writes on a weekly basis a blog. Now, this article is not only on his blog, but it's also on LinkedIn, it's also on Twitter, it's also on a variety of other channels that people can pick up. And he didn't write 6 different articles. He wrote 1 article, and he shared it across a variety of different channels. Here's another example of a community that leverages content to generate leads. This organization is called Invest Buffalo Niagara. And one of the things that you'll notice if you take a closer look at the website is this call to action right on the homepage. They say for the Canadian market, who is a target, Canada, this is your definitive guide to understand business in the US or business in Buffalo Niagara. And one of the things that they found was a gap in their position. And the gap that they found is no other organization in the United States had built a comprehensive guide to understanding doing business in the US if you were a Canadian company. So they built one. It was a 52-page guide, which obviously took a lot of time. But one of the things that they see is around 6 marketing qualified leads a month downloading this guide, opting in as to who they are so they can get some market intelligence, which we've covered in the past, and ultimately help build their pipeline of sales projects. So you see 3 different elements that we've talked about through the course. Persona building from a Canadian audience. You saw the ability to develop targets in terms of the industry sectors that they have, and also content through this 52-page guide. Another way to share content is through public relations. Public relations or advertorials are a great way to generate buzz about your community. Some of my favorite publications like the New York Times, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, and even CityLab pick up stories that are interesting not only from a company perspective, but from an organization perspective. So think about how your content could help support some of your PR efforts moving forward. Here's an example of an infographic. Now, you might think this infographic is for China, but you're wrong. This infographic is for Ireland. This is to show Chinese companies that there is a strong presence in Ireland. and the value of potentially relocating a company to Ireland. And they were really smart about how they did this because they used a graphic representation of the growth that China has seen over time and an overview of its relationship with Ireland to hopefully improve relations and attract investment, Chinese investment, to Ireland. Second tip, win Google's attention and affection. If you can win Google's attention and affection, you can create an increased competitive position for your organization. I'll tell you how. When you search online for a place, as you can see in this graphic, you have different results. And depending on the result that you have, you can be, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 in Google. Well, what studies have found is that 85% of people that are searching on Google will either go to the number 1 place or the number 2 place. So what does that mean if nobody can find you on Google? That means they're not coming to your website. And if they're not coming to your website, they don't know who you are. And if they don't know who you are, that limits your chances for a project to be located in your community. So remember, Google is very important. But how do you rank within Google? Well, you can rank in Google through a variety of ways. Here are some of the factors. Links back to your website, which you can see here. Adding meta page titles and tags to your website. Creating new original content. Understanding the responsiveness of your site. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it ready for mobile? And having landing pages is really, really important to ranking high within Google's algorithm. Here's some examples of some searches that I put into Google. The first search was to find a 25-acre industrial park in Spain. My company is an advanced manufacturing company. I'm looking for industrial parks in and around Spain. And what I found was some Woodman industrial parks in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We have a commerce park in Houston. We have another park in Las Lunas, New Mexico, and a park in Charleston. There is no 25-acre park industrial in Spain, according to Google. Another example is having an open call center in Costa Rica. I'd like to open a call center in Costa Rica for a company that is highly service intensive. And one of the things that you see here, and I'll point this out, are these little things called ads. We'll talk about this in a little bit. This is being paid for by the companies. So when you click on that, a company pays a small portion of money. Now, further down the road, you start to see call center jobs in Costa Rica, but I don't see any information for call centers in Costa Rica. This is where your website becomes really important, and those linking factors that we just talked about become really important. Now, what about Colombia? If I was to move to Colombia, what types of incentives would my company get? Well, I wasn't able to see which incentives my company was going to get, but I was able to see that Colombia is one of Latin America's most promising new tech hubs. Or here's some things to consider when moving to Colombia or moving to Medellin. This is all good information, but I still haven't found that investment promotion agency that's going to guide me through the process, that's going to support me in that effort. So what I would tell you is that there's really opportunity to align yourself and attract higher rankings within Google so that you can create more visibility for your organization. Now, I showed you some examples of ads. What those ads are is through Google's paid search advertising or Google's display network. Now, Google's display network is something that you may see a lot when you're searching the web. You may be on a website like this, and you're reading, and all of a sudden you come across an image. And you say, oh, that's an interesting image. You click on that image. You go back to a website that has information about the image, and you learn more, you purchase, or you leave. That process is called display network advertising. And you can see it in a lot of different ways. So here you see it on the right sidebar. Some websites you see it up top. Other websites you see it kind of, within your email signature up top here. But it appears all throughout the internet. And if you take a closer look the next time you're searching online or reading an article online, try to see if you can notice any any type of advertising that's on the side, it's likely that that advertising is going through Google. So how can you target on Google? Well, Google's got a lot of great tools that'll let you target based on the keywords that you're searching for, based on a location. So for example, if you're looking to target Chinese companies or American companies, for example, you can target based on particular geographies like San Francisco or Seattle or Austin or Denver. You can target based on the device people use. You can recycle that targeting. So you may think of that time where you came to a website and you searched for something and you left days ago, and all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, you're reading an article and that bag pops up on the side, and that was the bag that you were looking at, but now it's 10% cheaper. And you leave and you go away, and 2 weeks later, and that bag pops up again, and now it's 50% off. You click on the bag, you go to the site, you buy the bag. Think of that process every time you think of digital marketing. We can also do it based on the topic that you're looking to focus on. If there's a match within a customer, if it's in marketing, we can focus by demographic, psychographic, infographic pieces. We can focus by placements, where people are searching for. So Google has a variety of targeting options that you can get your message in front of your audience at the right time and for a particular cost. So here's an example of an available inventory, because what this essentially is an auction, and you buy particular keywords to show up on Google and to gain that paid placement. Here's an example of the different demographic profiles based on what people were clicking on. Were they male? Were they female? What time of the day was it? How many clicks was it? And ultimately, what was the cost? But you guys are likely wanting to see some real live results. So here's an example of a real life campaign that was done for a community targeting OEM suppliers, so suppliers of automotive companies. Now, personas were built, a strategy was put in place, certain geographies were targeted, and based on that, they put a message out using Google's display network to download a particular list. And over 1 month, that message got in front of 65,000 people. So think about you sending a direct mail to 65,000 people, how much that would cost. And you send this piece of mail to 65,000 people, and of those 65,000 people, almost 460 of them get that piece of mail or click on the ad. And of those 459 people that click on the ad, 11 people fill out forms for more information, 2 people send emails asking for more information, 14 PDFs were downloaded, and the total cost over 1 month was $1,400. Now, you may say that doesn't seem right. But with digital marketing, you can attract or target a broader audience for a less amount of money. The fourth component in building a world-class digital ecosystem is to do more with AI, business intelligence, and data visualization. Now, we talked earlier about how to use market intelligence to engage a prospect, to tell a better story. But what data visualization does is helps you communicate that story about your community, about your country, about your region in a way that a user can understand. Now, one of the things that I will tell you is that as human beings, we process visual information 60,000 times faster than we process anything else. So while we talked about pieces of content that you could use in the future, visual information is very, very powerful because it connects a user to the data that you have available. And you can do it in a lot of different ways. So here's an example of an MIT tool that searches for import-export data. And this is an example of a community that's showing what Canada exports. So you can see a large portion in cars, petroleum, raw aluminum, gold, some things that are unspecified, some smaller things like chemical woodsmanship or pig's meat. You can start to see how that makes up and supports their economy. That's one way that you can visualize data. But there are other ways that you can visualize data too. We saw in the China example that you can visualize data through infographics. You can visualize data through different tools available on the market. One of the tools that I like to use to visualize data is called Tableau. Using Tableau, you can visualize a variety of different data sets, make them consumable, apply them on your website, and use them as high-resolution PDFs. The last component, or the fifth component, is building a world-class investment promotion website and knowing that all websites are not built equal. There are some high-performing websites and low-performing websites. And it's really important, and I've emphasized this before, to leverage your website to communicate the story of your region or of your community. Here's one example of a website that I think does a great job at telling that story. Now you may think Invest Holland or the Holland government has its own standalone website and that's all they have. Well, no, they actually don't. Holland actually has a website specifically focused for entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. So this website is just for Holland in the Valley, bringing Netherlands and Silicon Valley together. This is a very smart, strategic way to use a website in a US geography to target a certain audience, to gather market intelligence, and to continue to tell that story, the business story of Holland. Another international website that I really like is Syndea's website, which is the Costa Rican agency for investment and promotion. And you can see a lot of different things that I like. But I'm going to quickly draw how users look at investment promotion websites, the navigation and the strategy behind these websites, and then we'll move on. Typically, a user's eye starts at the upper left of an investment promotion website. From the upper left, they scan down to the bottom right, hoping to find what it is that they want to find. From the bottom right, they scroll up to the top right, and from the top right, they scroll back down to the bottom left. So the majority of their attention is gathered right here, which you can see in this square. Now, why that's important is because your biggest, most important message has to really come at this left side of a website, followed by direct information that links what you do as an organization to the information and assets that you have. So using that architecture or how the eye looks at an investment promotion website, think about how your website's set up. Think about what you can do to engage people to stay on your website longer, to click through to more pages, and to be more connected with who you are as an organization. Now let's talk about how to leverage social media for ROI marketing or for investment attraction and promotion. We talked a little bit about LinkedIn. The first thing that I will tell you about LinkedIn is that LinkedIn is a purely attraction-based tool. You use LinkedIn to repurpose content, but for the most part, LinkedIn is for business attraction. Facebook, on the other hand, is for community engagement. You use Facebook to tell stories about your community, to keep those key stakeholders interested in what you're doing and how you're doing it. So, Facebook is for community. Twitter, on the other hand, is for news. You use Twitter to give quick sound bites about what's happening in your community. Now, some of these stories may be business stories, some of those stories may be internal community stories, but Twitter's really a news channel. Now, if you think about it, external and internal, and Twitter being kind of the mix of both, think about the type of content that you want to put on LinkedIn to attract a business audience, the type of content that you want to put on Facebook to tell a story for your internal audience, and the news that you want to share on Twitter. All of this, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, will help support your rankings within Google and generate more awareness across several channels to attract this type of information. Now you might say, Guillermo, we might not have time to get all of these started. Which would you recommend? Well, we would always recommend having professional LinkedIn profiles for the people of your organization, because one of the things that is consistently missing within investment, promotion, and attraction organizations is contact information. Who can I contact to get me what I need to potentially move my business there? Having these social channels in addition to contact information is critical to that process. Now, we talked about the power of digital marketing, and we talked about the purpose of content. So one of the things that you'll see in this slide, as a quick example, is a story that was done for supercomputing in Wyoming. It was on Wired magazine. It was put in there through some PR, and it said why you should put your supercomputing in Wyoming. And it told a tremendous story about Microsoft putting a supercomputer in Wyoming and how they were innovative and cutting edge. But one of the things that you may have noticed is this ad for the state of Florida. And here in the state of this ad for the state of Florida, you see Florida, the future is here. So if I'm a business owner considering Wyoming for a supercomputer, but I also see a Florida ad, I might just be interested enough to say, yeah, Wyoming seems interesting, but I could click to learn more about the state of Florida. And that, my friends, is the power that digital has in our world today. So what did we learn from this digital marketing exercise? Well, we learned what the digital landscape looked like. We learned how your region should look at digital and social media. And we learned what the components of a world-class digital approach are.